All right, so what we're going to be discussing here is the body's position that we get to the moment our front foot gets into the ground for the very first time. And this moment in time is called our foot strike. So we are going to be talking about the moment when, boom, those feet get into the ground for the very first time. And again, that's called our foot strike position. At foot strike, we want to be looking at our body in two halves. Our upper half and our lower half. At foot strike, we want our lower half to have rotated forward towards our target. And a useful thing to look at to know if we've been able to do that is the belt buckle. And is that belt buckle facing the target? If the belt buckle is facing the target, it's a pretty good chance that we have successfully rotated both the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip. When we're able to rotate the back foot, the back knee, and the back hip, as our front foot is getting into that foot strike position, we will successfully be able to get our belt buckle driving towards the target. If we specifically take a look at just the back foot of these four guys, let's watch as they are rotating that back leg, how that back foot is rotating. At this point in time, all four guys still have their entire foot flat onto the ground, and then they begin to rotate through or over top of their big toe. Their foot kind of rolls, folds over, or drives forward. And as the foot does that motion, we now shift our view to the back knee and know as the foot is rolling over the big toe, that the back knee is also rotating forward. And how those two things, the back foot and the back knee, are working together. We can also see that as we go to drive and rotate that back foot and back knee, how they do that while they gain ground down the mound and towards their catcher. So this is the difference between rotating our bodies forward, or a word for that is driving ourselves forward, versus just rotating in place. If we were just rotating in place, our bodies would not be able to gain this ground down the mound. Our bodies wouldn't be able to accelerate our power and energy down the mound. And we can then look and see that the foot has the toe, and then the heel is in front of the toe, meaning we have rotated forward. We then go to the upper body, the upper halves, from the waist up, and we want to separate that upper body from the lower body. We want the direction that our hips are facing, which is to the target, to be separate from the direction our shoulders are facing. So we notice we can see the Giants, the Padres, the Pirates, and his number. We can see the Phillies, and we can see the Brewers or Milwaukee. I'm not sure what they have displayed on their jerseys there. So the direction of their lower bodies is to the target, and the direction of their shoulders is still facing, for these right-handers, towards third base, or the direction they have been the entire time. So we rotate the lower body first, then we get into foot strike, then we rotate our upper body second. And the more that we can get those lower bodies to fully rotate to the target by the time that front foot hits the ground, and we've also been able to keep that upper body from rotating and staying back, we will have created as much upper lower half separation or hip shoulder separation as possible. And the more hip shoulder separation or upper lower half separation we can create, the more power we're going to be able to produce, and the amount of stress that's put on our arm is going to be reduced. What we're also going to notice is that almost regardless of your arm slot, if we have a true 3/4, low 3/4, high 3/4, an over-the-top arm slot, or anything in between those, we're always going to find ourselves in a relatively 90 degree angle, meaning from our elbow across to our other shoulder, we want to think is nice and even. 90 degrees in that armpit. We also want to think 90 degrees in that elbow. We want this type of arm position, that 90-90, we'll call it, at the moment of foot strike. When our arm has loaded up to this position here at the moment of foot strike, and the upper body has not rotated yet, our body's rotation will accelerate the throw forward. If the arm is not in this 90-90 position, the body's rotation forward is going to be less than ideal and in sync with how the arm will flow after the body goes. So we're looking for this 90-90-ish position in that throwing arm at foot strike. What we can also notice at foot strike is, where is this glove at? It's in front of the body by the rib cage. We're not letting it, if we're thinking here's some water, don't drown the glove. Don't let your glove get wet. Don't drown that glove. This one right here is a little too high. Should be more towards the belt. Okay. When the glove gets finished into the body like this, it's able to help keep this front shoulder in line, meaning it's not going to open up early. Because if that front shoulder starts to open up early, that's going to start to pull the back shoulder forward early. And now we would not have separated our upper and lower halves as much, because the angle of the shoulders would begin to rotate forward, which would be more matching the angle of the hips. The final thing we're going to look at is this front leg. We see all these guys have different degrees of bend in their front legs. But what we're going to notice is that as the upper body now rotates to throw, we need to make our front leg become a firm fixture of which we can rotate around. So thinking about this front leg here turning into a flagpole. My flagpole is always going to be strongest if it's straight. Or at least I can't have my flagpole move forward while my body is trying to rotate forward. So we'll redraw these little outlines here, and we will have these guys. Oh man, that's all right. It's going to get back to it anyway. Boom. And now we'll watch as they go to throw. How that leg is locking out, stiffening up, straightening out. So that now that leg is here. Now that leg is here. Now that leg is here and here. From the bend, straightening it out. And what we can notice is as that leg locks out, stiffens up, straightens out, becomes that firm flagpole, notice how that upper body is able to catapult itself out in front and down more. Able to get out in front more. Out in front more. So that way, if we look, we can't get everyone exactly at release, but ball just out, ball just out, ball is coming out, ball is slightly a little bit more out than the bottom two. But we're able to look at this angle of the chin to the waist, back out to the front foot, boom, boom, boom. Just how out in front of themselves they're getting. And that's because of that front leg's ability to lock out. So we can see that they're starting, boom, boom, there, and there. So now it's not just the arm throwing the ball down. It's the body throwing the ball down. It's the body going down with the throw. Body accelerating down. And as the body's accelerating down, the lower half is firming up. So that way, as I need to finish all this violent rotation, I have the ability to do that around that firm front leg. I have that ability to rotate around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my back leg around. I can finish all that violent rotation from my hips around. I can finish all that violent rotation out of my back shoulder around, giving my arm plenty of time to slow down and giving the back muscles, my scapular muscles, all the time they need to activate and slow down that rapidly accelerating arm. All right, we're going to be discussing the mechanics from a front view, and we're just going to concern ourselves with our path or the flow down the mound. So we already got these videos to the top of these guys' leg lifts. Obviously, every pitcher comes down the mound at different rates, different speeds. However, to make these guys flow together, I have changed up their speeds to fit. So what we're going to see is that we got Jerry Jones over here getting that front leg fully extended and really sitting into his delivery. We got Greinke, who's got his knee, which is going to be further back towards second base than his foot is. He's really taking this front knee and kind of curling it back so that his front hip stays closed. And Kirby is going like Jones here with his front leg, but he's keeping it in a more bent position rather than kicking it straight out like Jones. But what we do notice is no matter how these guys load into their back hips, getting down into their legs, engaging their lower halves, what do we notice? We notice where the glove is going. And that's to help them be able to see over their front shoulder. They want to be looking down the barrel of their shoulder, because the longer we can be looking here over this shoulder as we proceed down the mound. Obviously, we've gotten back to center, but look, we're still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that shoulder. Still looking right over that front shoulder. The longer we can do that into our moment of foot strike, bam, bam, we can see front shoulder, and our head is still trying to fight to keep that our front shoulder is still fighting to stay above our chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. The front shoulder is still fighting to stay in above the chin. And when we do that, we can see that the back hip now has been able to come through, exposing the belt buckle to the batter, to our catcher, but preventing, because that front shoulder's fought to stay in so that we continue to look over it. Look what that's done with our chest. It's kept it squared up, squared up, squared up, as that lower half has been able to fire, and there lies our upper lower half separation that we're trying to achieve. And now here comes the most important part. Getting into this position is key for both our power production, our ability to throw the baseball with our body, thus reducing the amount of stress that's going on through our arm during that delivery, and helping ensure, this wasn't the straightest line here, helping ensure our energy continues to flow to the catcher. All right, we can see that head staying there, that head staying there. Kirby's fighting to keep it in there. And you can see he's fighting to keep it in there because it did not go more out there. So we're rotating that back shoulder. We're rotating that back shoulder forward. 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 So that way all of our power can be flung through those fingers, out through that ball, forward. If we watch that again without any interruption. Into foot strike. Out of foot strike. Everything staying in line with our target. And then noticing as they're getting into release, where are those chin and chests going? To the target. To the target. The angle of our trunk, this mass from our shoulders through our waist, our trunk right now is upright. It's above our hips. In relation to the ground, it's in a 90-degree angle. As we get into release, those trunks in relation to the ground are no longer up here trying to throw the baseball. Instead, in relation to the ground, these trunks of these elite throwers of the baseball, both in terms of command, the best to ever do it, in terms of longevity and success, one of the best to do it, and an upcomer with elite velocity and potential to be an all-star. Every one of their trunks at release went from being up here at foot strike to out here at release, bringing that energy down the mound, but most importantly, towards our target. And that's something that we're able to see even easier and more clearly in the side view videos. All right, so if we kind of take this back once more and we see these arm slots, we'd say, boom. Oops, let me draw a better line than that. Right, we're at a high 3/4, 3/4. We are in a same thing, 3/4, high 3/4. Same thing here, right? So these are some of your most common arm slots are the 3/4 to high 3/4 arm slot, and then what we'll look at next here are some guys that are in that lower 3/4 tier. So we'll let we got Luis Hill, Kyle Harrison, and Carl Crawford. All right, so the same thing. Moment of that foot strike, we can see that they're still fighting to keep that front shoulder in, keep that front shoulder in, fighting to keep that front shoulder in, and then coming to release and through, we can see how those heads are fighting to stay in. Luis Hill a little bit outside, but we can see through release, bam, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there. Now it's out, which is no big deal. It's already stable for long enough post-release, bam, that he could do a cartwheel over here if he wanted to after. So fighting to keep that front shoulder in, and by doing that, the shoulders have stayed squared up, and with a good lower half timing and pattern sequencing, we got the back hip to have come forward, the back hip to have come forward, exposing that belt buckle to the batter, creating that upper and lower half separation that we're trying to seek in order to achieve higher velocities and minimize the stress that's put on our arm during these high intense and continuous throws. If we then take these guys into their moment of release, we got that same concept that we did earlier, and we can see here's our low 3/4, even getting closer, some would say, to even true sidearm. We have that low 3/4, and we got that 3/4 to low 3/4. But what we can notice is all the same with those different arm slots, but the most common arm slots in our game. All these guys are fitting the same bill in their own unique ways, but these important key points are all very much getting checked off by each, no matter what. All right, bud, we're going to play a video 2 times here for you. First time will be all one motion so you can see what you look like synced up. And then the second time, we'll pause it at that moment of foot strike so you can compare and contrast your body's positioning to the big leaguer's positioning. So that way we can better understand the differences that we see and how we're then going to make the changes to better fit what we want. All right, so like we learned in the big league videos, at foot strike, we got to be looking at the two halves, the upper half and lower half. And as we can see, as that front foot is getting itself into the ground at foot strike, the lower body has not rotated anything from the backside and has kind of, as you can see, as the front foot starts to get into the ground, as it's getting into the ground is when we're trying to get the rotation of the front foot, which means we haven't rotated the front knee yet. And because those two haven't gone, it's going to be tough to get this front hip to start opening itself up for us. So now we're in this front foot position of having no drive off that back foot, no rotation from the back knee, no drive or rotation from the back hip. And because this front knee is still in, and this front foot is landing in, and this front hip is still in, I am struggling to then create any power forward with that lower body. And because we're not doing the things we need to be doing with the lower body at the time that we need to be doing them by, we can see what your upper body is trying to do. Your upper body is trying to create the power by leaning forward. At foot strike, we're looking to be more in this alignment with our chest and our hips. And we can see because your lower body's not doing what it should be doing, it starts to lean forward very early. And now you are not only leaning forward a little early, but you're opening up early because, again, your lower body is not doing anything for you. So your shoulders are like, man, we got to create some energy so that we're going to fly open to try to do that. But we need to throw the ball this way. Our energy needs to be going this way. So if we're flying open this way, that's reducing the amount of energy we can send that way. And when we have these opposite forces occurring in our delivery, that's when stress gets put on our arm. Not to mention how we now have to make this throw. Watch what your body is going to do coming out of foot strike here to make this throw. We are quite literally jumping in the air. Jumping to throw the baseball. Because your hips have not rotated forward at all, they need to get forward. But both of your feet are in the ground right now. So the only way we can really get the hips going is to leap them. And then now the energy's going up. You got to throw the ball down. How are we going to do that? Especially when you are leaping up to make the throw. Leaping out of your shoes to make that throw. I like to say that baseball is such an interesting sport that it's been around for as long as it's been around, yet you'll always see something that you've never seen if you study the game long enough. And this right here is my latest. I've never thought I would see something like this until you see something like this, and this is my new one. This is my new one. So I'm kind of at a loss of our first steps to fixing this. I mean, it's just going to be crazy amount of throwing drills, I think. It's going to be a crazy amount of like just body and pattern sequencing. But I mean, this is going to be a lot of work to deprogram this sequencing of movements. We have the hand coming and falling out of your glove well, and then we just have this hyper aggressive elbow coming up to then put us in this really bizarre downward angling alignment of the shoulders, like we're pulling your bow and arrow downwards. We got to fire this thing out this way, right? So if the mound's going down this way and we got to throw down this way and you're loading it this way, as our body finally goes this way, it's only going to go more down. So now we got to then go way up. We saw all those guys as they were separating their hands, they're getting, if their shoulders are dipping one way or the other, this one's getting lower than this one because they're trying to fight to stay back from going down the mound versus you reaching and wanting to get that down the mound. And now we're just facing down. And now we got to find a way to then throw, and that leads you then to going wicked up. So yeah, we're going to be doing a lot of throw-in drills where we get you in a wide base, kind of like this. This knee would be a lot more further back, but we'd have you somewhere like foot, shin, hip, so that way the knee wasn't here, but it's over here. But then we'd have hips, just like this is here, and then have this be up here, working it to rock it back, learning how to get it out in front, and then finishing around, having this finish around but not come off the ground, have the hips finish around, have the back knee finish around, and just learn how to finish down, 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 with every part of the backside going down and around instead of up. So we got a lot of work ahead of us, and you got even more work ahead of you at home to be done if you want this to get cleaned up before high school tryouts. Because high school tryouts come around and you hop up on a mound and coaches watch this, they're probably not going to want to see you have to pitch in games because they're going to be worried about your arm's health. So if they eliminate you as a pitcher at tryouts, that's going to make it more difficult to make the team. But if they can say, hey, this guy could be a pitcher for us, that's almost a guaranteed ticket to making a team. All right, bud, we got your video here. That will play 2 times in a row. First time will be all one motion so you can see what you look like synced up from these 2 points of view. And then the second time, we will pause it at that moment of foot strike so that way we can compare and contrast your body's position to the big leaguers that you just got done learning from. That way we can better understand the changes we're going to want to be looking to make in our delivery here. So, I forgot to pull this up. If we look at here, like we said, we're pausing it at the moment of foot strike, and that's when that front foot gets all the way into the ground. And what we're going to notice is that the big toe hits first, and it's the inside part of the big toe that hits first. And then we're going to see that the rest of the inside of your foot then gets into the ground. And then from this point, we're going to have to roll your body's weight over this way. And that's when the rest of the foot will then get into the ground. So your front foot first makes contact with the ground here, but it doesn't get all the way into the ground until about here, right in this window of time. So at this point, we look at our two halves and we can see that our lower half has not done any rotating really at all from the points that we want to look at visually, the hips, knees, and feet. And we can see that your back knee is trying to rotate. It's trying to rotate. It's trying to rotate, but it can't continue or finish the rotation. And that's because the back foot is just stuck on the pitching rubber, as this foot has already gotten into the ground. And what we saw with the big leaguers is that this back foot rotates forward. The back knee then is also rotating forward. And when those two go, that back hip gets to drive forward. And then we also saw with the front view and how that front leg does that same thing. That front foot opens or rotates forward. The front knee opens or rotates forward. And then same thing with that front hip, opens or rotates forward. So that way our entire lower half has rotated towards the target by the time that front foot gets into the ground, all while that upper body is fighting to stay back. And what we notice is when that big toe first gets into the ground, or even when the whole inside part of your foot hits the ground, at this point, we can see you're relatively exactly where we're trying to be at that moment of initial foot strike, and that's that 90-90 with that shin looking down that shoulder, with that glove making its way in towards our body. But unfortunately, we're not able to maintain or hold this position here for the duration it takes for our front foot to get actually into the ground. Because we can see now, by the time this front foot is all the way into the ground, the upper body has begun to rotate forward. So now that the body has begun to rotate forward, what we would say as too early, and too early would just be in relation to when this front foot finally gets into the ground. We're now left with less rotational power to throw with. We also can see that this back foot still hasn't really given way to turning itself over to help get this knee to turn over, to really help get this back hip going. Because this back hip is still your back hip. It's way behind you as you're trying to throw your upper body in front of it now. And what we're going to notice is as you come out of this foot strike, now everything's just trying to reach and catch up with your arm. And now we're just kind of pushing and reaching this baseball in front of us. And this kind of like pushy arm motion that we got is going to be non-ideal for velocity, not good for your arm's health long term, and command is going to be hit and miss. So our big thing is really, really learning how like we can't be feeling front foot hitting the ground and our lower body just completely still in its original alignment. Right? We can see that even more easily from the front view here, and how as soon as that front foot, boom, touches the ground, and we get even the entire inside of the foot, and we start to roll, we can see what's rotating first. Your shoulders are coming through before your hips are even coming through. So, like we saw in the big league video, we got to rotate the lower body first, then the upper body second. right now, because your lower body is not rotating on time, and again, on time is by that front foot hitting the ground, and boom, you're doing that right there. We have to have all of this rotated forward already, all of this opened up already, and rotated facing forward. And then we would have a decent positioning here. But as we can see, we lose this decent position in order to get the lower body finally kind of rotated. But again, it's still barely rotated, even at this point in time. And at this point in time, the barely rotated is because of the upper body getting so far beyond the hips that the hips now just get kind of pulled and dragged along because of the shoulder. So now the shoulder is pulling these hips through, which means the shoulders are having to work harder to pull more weight, only to produce less power. So we really need to get our lower body firing and moving on time in this delivery. And it's going to be very easy to do that if we're focusing on that during catch play.